hire me. I'm available for a musical. I can Bobbiana. Yeah, anyways.
There's no romance. What's the point? Just kidding. Maybe.
Yo, it's Anne, aka Antagonist. Welcome back to my channel where we talk all things books, movie, and TV with an emphasis on romance. We're talking Wicked today. Wicked! Nobody asked for that. Ooh. So like many of you, I was completely enamored by Wicked Part 1 last year. It became my hyperfixation, my personality, my Roman empire. I may or may not have gotten into some really heated workplace arguments about it.
Hold on! Her sister was a witch, right? And what was her sister? A princess! The Wicked Witch of the East, bro!
I'm gonna stab him.
You're gonna look at me and you're gonna tell me that I'm wrong? Am I wrong?
It's my favorite
She
movie.
wore a crown and she came down in a bubble, dog!
While desperately waiting for Wicked Part 2, I decided to dive more into Wicked content. And when I went down this terrifying, scary rabbit hole, I discovered that Wicked, the movie, is an adaptation of an adaptation of a retelling of an adaptation of a novel. So, naturally, I decided I'm going to consume every version of Wicked. And by the end of the video, I'm going to rank them based on 5 criteria: story and plot, setting and world building, characters, theme, romance arc, because this is a romance channel, let's be serious, and lastly, overall enjoyment. And based on these criteria, I will determine which version of Wicked is the best. So, let's get into it. Starting off with the OG Wicked, the novel. Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West is a 1995 dark fantasy novel by Gregory Maguire. It's a retelling of L. Frank Baum's 1900 classic, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and it serves as a biography and origin story of the Wicked Witch of the West. As a child, Maguire and his siblings would often act out the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz and play with the perspectives and different versions of the story. Eventually, Maguire became a really well-respected children's author, but in his first venture in adult fiction, he decided that he wanted to explore the topic of evil. Specifically, the question, what does being evil mean? Reflecting on the 1939 film, he imagined Glinda and the Wicked Witch's history together, which sparked both laughter and inspiration. I thought to myself, they know each other. They've crossed paths before. They went to school together. I thought that was so funny because it was such a good idea. And it became $1 million idea. The novel Wicked can be separated into 3 main parts, and honestly, each part feels like a completely different book. Part 1, Green and Yet Unseen. Part 1 is basically the prequel to the prequel, which sounds fun until you realize that Elphaba is barely in it. She's a baby and then a toddler, then a confused child. So the plot mostly happens to her, which is tough because this first part represents about a quarter of the book. So that's 120 pages of us essentially learning not much about Elphaba as a character at all. Rather, Maguire tells the story through the lens of Elphaba's parents. We have Frex, her father, who is a guilt-heavy preacher, and her mother, Milena, a chain-smoking aristocrat who often engages in extracurricular activities behind her husband's back. Not really behind her husband's back because she has zero subtlety when it comes to her affairs. Both of these dysfunctional adults immediately project all their feelings onto Elphaba at birth. Frex sees Elphaba's green skin as a moral crisis, while Milena sees Elphaba's general demeanor as a nuisance and an embarrassment, which unfortunately you can kind of get why. Elphaba is born with razor-sharp teeth, making it extremely difficult to breastfeed to the point where Milena would start bleeding. And she's allergic to water, so baby can't be washed, and her appearance makes her family isolated from the rest of society. Maguire emphasizes that Elphaba begins life as an object of interpretation. Her green skin becomes a canvas for fear, guilt, and moral judgment, which quite obviously mirrors real-world colorism and the way that certain religious groups historically have labeled darker skin as cursed or sinful. This part is thematically rich, but my gosh, is it slow. So slow. It took me months to get through part 1. But this part establishes how quickly society is ready to deem Elphaba as wicked before she's even able to speak. Part 2. College life, roommate drama, and potential war crimes. Finally, Elphaba develops a personality while attending Shiz University with her sister, Nessa Rose. At Shiz, she meets Glinda, her blonde, privileged roommate, and together their contrasting personalities embody conscience versus compliance. Meanwhile, there's a lot of political unrest that is brewing. In Oz, animals with a capital A, so that means animals that are sentient and can speak, are losing their rights. And a lot of the anti-animal propaganda is pushed by Madame Morrible, who is spreading her message throughout the school. Elphaba sees this injustice and spends all her free time with Dr. Dilliman, who is a goat professor trying to prove that animals have souls. And he's not trying to prove this metaphorically, he's trying to prove it physically, as in looking for a soul as if it's a pancreas, okay? Because at this point, appealing to the morality of the masses is all that he has left in terms of a strategy. We also meet Bach, who is nothing like his character in the musical. The only thing that is the same is that he's a munchkin and he has a crush on Glinda. But even that, his crush on Glinda is mild and irrelevant at best. Like, it's giving we started dating in second period and by fourth period we're divorced before the bell rings. You know what I mean? In the novel, Bach has an actual personality and has a surprisingly meaningful connection with Elphaba. The two of them grow close because Bach and his friends work at the library and they secretly smuggle books and research materials to Dilliman and Elphaba because women and animals aren't allowed in libraries. And I have to say that was one of the most interesting parts of the book to me. Then Dr. Dilliman is murdered, like throat slit, sister. And the school tries to cover it up and say it's a freak accident, but Glinda, Bach, and Elphaba all can see that this is complete BS. To the point where Madame Morrible tries to put a spell on Glinda, Nessa Rose, and Elphaba to make them forget this whole ordeal, but Dr. Dilliman's oppression serves as Elphaba's political awakening, so she leaves Shiz and essentially goes rogue. These chapters are hands down the strongest in the novel, in my opinion. The character work, the political depth and commentary, and genuine emotional weight work together really well. It's no wonder that the musical focuses almost entirely on this section. Part 3, Wicked, aka Tragic PR. The final third of the novel shifts tone again. Actually, it probably shifts tones 5 times just in part 3. Let me explain. And you might want to sit down for this part if you're not already sitting, because it gets wild. It gets crazy. Elphaba becomes a full-fledged animal rights activist. She is PETA. PETA is her, okay? But her activism is kind of messy, inconsistent, and constantly sabotaged by the wizard's regime, so this forces her to go into hiding. Now, let me talk about Fiyero. Fiyero actually showed himself in the second part of the novel, but he barely existed. He's in Elphaba, Nessa Rose, and Glinda's friend group, but he's so underwritten that if I hadn't already watched the movie and the musical, I wouldn't know that this man was relevant. He was giving team furniture, y'all. This is one of my biggest issues with the novel. Characters are introduced, developed for a little bit, and then they disappear for hundreds of pages or permanently, which completely removes their significance in the narrative. Anyways, like I said, Elphaba is in hiding. Her family doesn't know where she is. None of her friends know. Fiyero actually ends up bumping into her, and they begin a intense emotional affair. Fiyero is a married prince. He was arranged since the age of 8, but he genuinely falls in love with Elphaba. But Elphaba holds back, partly because she wants to protect him from her political work, but partly because she doesn't want to confront the ethics of what she's doing. Fiyero often questions her methods, especially her plan to assassinate Madame Morrible. And as he follows her one night, soldiers ambush him and he is beaten to death. Grief-stricken and feeling responsible for Fiyero's death, Elphaba joins a convent for 7 years. Eventually, she seeks out Sarima, who is Fiyero's widow, hoping for forgiveness. Sarima lets her stay at their castle, but she refuses to hear the confession because she prefers to keep her illusions intact, and she doesn't want to, taint her view of her husband, even though she suspects things. She actually suspects that he was messing around with Glinda, but clearly that wasn't the case. And from the convent, Elphaba is also forced to bring Lear. Lear is a boy that is heavily implied to be Fiyero and Elphaba's love child, but Elphaba refuses to acknowledge this and never mothers him. And also, I have to mention, and I don't know how, there's no elegant way to say this, Fiyero's oldest son relentlessly bullies Lear and plays a really terrible prank on him, causing him almost to drown. So Elphaba impales Fiyero's oldest son with an icicle. And like, and she kills the oldest son with the ice. Like, there's no way to explain that. Like I don't know how else to insert that in this narrative. Just like, this book is wild. This book is wild. There's just nothing else to. That's it. Okay, we move. While Elphaba is gone, Sarima and her family are captured by the wizard's forces. On her journey, Elphaba encounters a deity who reveals the truth about her birth. Her mother was drugged by a stranger and assaulted. And the novel phrases it as made love, which is incredibly uncomfortable. It's clearly non-consensual, but the language is sanitized. And I have to say, I strongly dislike the way the book deals with the subject of SA. The worst example of this is in the previous part, where characters go to a philosophy club and one of the characters, a side like background character, is bound and assaulted on stage by a tiger. The scene is incredibly graphic and horrific, and the book just moves on. The character's trauma is never explored, and he dies off page. The scene feels like shock value rather than meaningful commentary, and the lack of narrative reflection makes it feel and makes it come across like a careless and disturbing insert rather than something meaningful to the theme or plot. It's one of the most jarring tonal shifts in the book, and not in a morally productive way. Now back to the main plot. Elphaba's sense of identity unravels with all that stuff that's gone on, so she questions her soul, her origins, her morality, killing kids and stuff is crazy. She especially doubts herself when she goes to visit her sister, who is now the governor of Munchkinland. In the novel, Nessa is actually born without arms, and Glinda enchants her shoes so that she's able to stand upright. And this sense of power makes her become a religious tyrant and dictator. She's scary, bro. She's scary. She's very unhinged. Very. Which stays consistent throughout all the versions of Wicked, as you will see. Then the events of The Wizard of Oz commence. So Dorothy's house kills Nessa Rose. Glinda and Elphaba meet again, and she's pissed off that Glinda gives Dorothy Nessa's magical shoes, mostly fearing that the wizard will use them to invade Munchkinland, which is the only region that is still resisting the wizard's propaganda. Glinda meets the wizard and discovers that he's holding Noor, which is Fiero's surviving daughter. Everybody else in his family was killed, and he keeps Noor as a hostage to use as leverage against Elphaba so that she doesn't act out. And specifically, he wants the Grimoire, he wants control, and he just wants Elphaba gone. Like, he's not really trying to barter with her. He's just be evil to be evil's sake. So he also sends Dorothy to try and kill the witch. Elphaba starts to be called the Wicked Witch of the West, mostly because her sister is called the Wicked Witch of the East because she's such a she's such a dictator and tyrant. So people are like, she's a witch, get her. Which, high key, like, when we get into what some of the stuff that she has done, it makes sense. It kind of makes sense. Sorry, Nessa. I can't defend you, sister. It's over. So Dorothy arrives at the witch's castle, Elphaba's castle, and she's actually kind, but things escalate accidentally. Elphaba's cape catches fire and Dorothy panics, so she throws water on her to try to save her, and then she melts and Elphaba dies. Essentially, her wickedness is just terrible branding, like bad PR from the propaganda that the wizard was giving, and all this misunderstanding and hoopla results in her death. So by the time Dorothy arrives, it seems like Elphaba's fate was already sealed. That's very clear throughout the book. As a work of literary fantasy, Wicked stands out for its blend of myth revisionism, its political allegory, and it asks not how a witch is wicked, but how society decides that she is. Now on to the musical. So Wicked, the Broadway musical, premiered on October 30th, 2003 at the Gershwin Theater in New York City. The musical was composed by Stephen Schwartz. Fun fact, after reading Gregory Maguire's novel, Schwartz basically fought off Universal Pictures, who wanted to make a movie of the book instead, but he convinced them and thought it would be better to make it a musical. And since then, Wicked has become one of Broadway's biggest hits, second only to The Lion King in terms of gross revenue. And because I'm so dedicated to this channel, I went to see it live on Broadway in New York City for you. not me. For you. It was for you, not me. For you. From you. I'm so selfless. Like, I just give so much. The musical, as I said, uses the middle part of Maguire's novel as its foundation. So Elphaba and Glinda meeting at Shiz is consistent. Their clashing personalities, their unlikely friendship, Madame Morrible and the Wizard's propaganda, and the anti-animal policies that are there, but they are heavily simplified. Everything else, though, totally reworked in this musical. The musical takes inspiration from the book, but works to simplify a lot of the themes. Most of the blank characterization from the book is amped up and exaggerated for entertainment and ease of digestibility for wider audiences. In the book, Elphaba is messy, morally complex, sometimes dark and cruel as a character. Like, she's a mistress, a murderer, a neglectful mother. Meanwhile, Elphaba is essentially morally perfect in the musical, if we think about it. She's just a misunderstood girl with big dreams. And the musical emphasizes the bullying she experiences for her green skin. Like, Elphaba's father, Frex, was never Father of the Year by any means in the novel, but he is way crueler in the musical. In the book, he's cold and spiritually guilt-ridden, but not cartoonishly hateful. Versus in the musical, he's literally like, ew, it's green, get it away from me. But I have to say, Glinda's characteristics are amped up the most in the musical. In the book, she's privileged, yes, but she's quiet and mostly passive, and she's just trying to stick to the status quo and comply. In the musical, she's vain, hyper popular, comedically over the top, but she does grow into a genuinely caring person. In the musical, her arc is about becoming a genuinely good person, whereas in the novel, she simply just drifts along with her power and privilege. The friendship/rivalry between Elphaba and Glinda is the heart of the musical, and is way more central than in the book, where it's merely just a subplot. There's also the love geometry situation, okay? The insertion of the love triangle or love square or love hexagon, just basically the idea that Nessa Rose likes Bach, who likes Glinda, who likes Fiero, who likes Elphaba, isn't a thing in the novel. The only romance that holds true in the book is the romance between Fiero and Elphaba that is central to the plot in the same way that it is in the musical. Which I have to say, their romance, though integral to the plot, is terribly underdeveloped in all the versions of Wicked, and I'll never understand why. But more on that later. It's the second half of the musical where things really get off the rails, mostly with the origin of the Oz characters and Elphaba's ending differing so much from the novel. So for the Oz characters, we have the Cowardly Lion. So in the musical version, Elphaba rescues him and he mistakenly turns against her later on as a misunderstanding, thinking that she had kidnapped him as a child. In the book version, Lion Cub is freed by random Shiz students, and he vaguely blames Elphaba for his life problems because he remembers seeing Green Face talking in class. I'm not gonna lie, I do think the musical makes more sense with that one. Then we have the Tin Man. So in the musical, Bach becomes the Tin Man thanks to Nessa Rose being generally unhinged. Versus in the book, you will not believe what happens. Essentially, a lady comes to Nessa Rose, who is the governor of Munchkinland, and says, hey, my housemaid is in love with a stable boy and she wants to get married and leave, so I'm not gonna have a housemaid. And guess what Nessa Rose does? She goes, you know what you should do? As reparations, you should cut the arm off of the stable boy, because that way she won't want to marry him anymore and you'll get to keep your housemaid. And then the lady who came says, okay, bet. And she actually goes through with it. And in trying to save his life, Elphaba turns that stable boy into the Tin Man. So way darker and way messier. And yet, unhinged Nessa Rose is at the scene of the crime in both versions. Girl, I can't save you, sister. There's no defending you, sister. You're crazy. As for the Scarecrow, I honestly don't know where he comes from in the book. Elphaba prays that it's Fiero, like hoping that he had come back to life in the Scarecrow, but it's very clearly not that. And he's just a random magical scarecrow. Like, there's no correlation whatsoever. But in the musical, as we know, Fiero turns out to be the scarecrow with the help of Elphaba. And I know that the novel version of Elphaba is rolling in her grave somewhere. But the biggest difference between the musical and its inspiration is that it has a happy ending. Well, for Elphaba, the animals are still very much oppressed, and the musical does not address that. And that's my big issue there. The animal subplot gets dropped so quick, and the whole cat fight about who gets to kiss Fiyero becomes the central plot there, and it gets center stage. But who cares? Elphaba got her man. So the Wicked films, directed by John M. Chu, were originally announced by Universal years ago in 2016, but filming and casting didn't finally take shape until 2022. They split the movie into two films, 2.5 hours long plus, allowing more space for characterization, backstory, and new scenes. Or that's the claim that they're making. In my opinion, the first film succeeds brilliantly at this. It brings the magic of Broadway to the screen while adding material that the musical didn't have time to explore, like making Elphaba's primary caretaker an animal, which plants seeds of her lifelong connection to animal rights. The film also invests more time in Elphaba's social isolation and Madame Marble's manipulation of that. And the musical numbers are reimagined fully in a fantastical, cinematical way, which makes the songs feel even bigger than they did on stage. However, the second film really inherits the structural problems of the original musical. Where I could forgive a sloppy second act in a stage play because they had 55 minutes to cram all the story, the film has quadrupled the amount of time, but isn't able to improve on the musical shortcomings, especially in the latter half. Even with extra runtime, Fiyero and Elphaba's romance remains incredibly underdeveloped. To be fair, as I mentioned, this is a problem in the novel and musical as well. None of the versions truly explain why they fall in love so deeply, but Wicked Part 1 and Part 2 had ample amount of time to fix it, and they didn't. The second part of Part 2 is especially rushed. After Fiyero is killed, there's a powerful number with no good deed, and Elphaba decides to go full witch, but okay, what does that really mean? We don't really see the consequences of it and what that entails. Personally, I wanted to see her fully unleash her powers. I wanted her to go wild, maybe even hurt Dorothy a little bit for a second before realizing that she needed to fix things. One thing that I do love about the films is that Galinda actually carries on Elphaba's mission to help the animals. This wasn't clear in the Broadway musical, but in the films we see that Elphaba's work continues even after her death, which gives her a martyr-like significance while still allowing her to live happily ever after with Fiyero. Now that I've recapped and summarized all three versions and their differences, we are going to evaluate them based on the criteria. So the first criteria is story/plot. So in this ranking, the musical is last in this category. She's cute, she's fun, iconic songs, hilarious characters, but honestly, the second half is basically who gets Fiyero. Oh, never mind. Like, girls, let's not fight. Let's be friends and forget about the animals and the political commentary and moral stuff. Basically, it simplifies things for entertainment, but this comes at the expense of depth. In second place, I'd say the films. They actually do a lot right with giving more backstory and context to the characters that the musical skimmed over. Overall, it made things feel bigger in terms of the plot. That said, like I mentioned, part 2 is really rushed and choppy and confusing, but it still manages to land a thematically coherent ending. The book does win in this category if I'm being completely objective. Although I didn't love all the parts of the book and felt that it could be really disjointed at times, ultimately it delivers an interesting narrative that really showcases the complexity of labeling people as inherently good or bad. Next, we have the setting/world building. So for me, last place is the musical. Again, cute, sparkly, but simplified. And I do think it's just a constraint of its medium. I don't know how fantastical and grand you can make a stage play. You're limited to your props and just the limitations of the physicality that comes with a musical. Then we have the book as second, which might be an unpopular opinion. So yes, there's a lot of deep and layered lore in the books and politically complex dynamics there. But in terms of the visuals, it requires a lot of mental effort, and it's just never going to live up on the page as it does in person, especially the way that the films managed to do it. The film takes the crown here. Like visually, absolutely stunning. The set pieces, tulip fields, just everything was just so grand. You can see magic and the landscapes and architectures and just all the production that was put into the making of the different scenes and the sets. The movie is able to give you a sense of scale and physicality that just isn't possible in the other two mediums. So almost by default, because of it being a movie, it's obviously going to win in the visual setting. And we have the characters. So in last place, I'm putting the book. Are the characters morally gray? Sure. Complex? Okay. But at the same time, a lot of them are just caricatures to me, and there's not a lot of depth. We're looking at them from a distance throughout the entire book. Even the times where we are in Elphaba's mind, a lot of it is spent looking at the outside things that are happening to her rather than having an internal dialogue with her as a character. And as I mentioned, a lot of the characters are underexplored, and many of them vanish midway through the narrative, which leaves a lot of threads unfinished and just like vessels as characters, if you ask me. I actually put the film in second place. They do give more nuance, especially to Elphaba. I think her characterization is really well done. I think Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo deliver really nuanced and great interpretations of the characters. I would say the shortcomings is they definitely could have developed more characters, namely Fiyero is the big one, even Nessa Rose as well. That being said though, I'm saying the musical wins for characters because I feel like the musical was the original place for building those characters. Although they are flattened characters, they have very complete journeys and arcs and clear motivations. Editing Anne over here. I also forgot to mention that one huge aspect of Galinda's character that the musical introduces over the book is that Galinda isn't magical at all. So in the book, Galinda possesses magical powers, and she's actually Madame Morble's star pupil, and she's the one who gets one-on-one tutoring from Madame Morble. And it's actually Elphaba whose magic is lacking and doesn't really present itself until the close to the final act of the book. So in the musical, they went the opposite way and they made Elphaba the chosen one with great powers. But it's the making Galinda not magical that's really great character work, in my opinion. This change makes Galinda's character so much more interesting and complex, with her being a fraud and basically a political pawn to the wizard and Madame Morble schemes. Versus Galinda in the book stays the same character throughout all of it and doesn't really go through any kind of arc. I feel like because I had the musical in mind, all the iconic aspects of the characters were shaped by that. So I think it wins in that category. Then we have themes. I'm saying the musical comes in last place. Like I said, there's the cute, digestible focus on friendship and good and evil, but a lot of the deeper and social commentary gets lost and it's just completely stripped away. Like I said, the animals are still oppressed by the end and we don't know anything about it. In second place, I'm going to put the film. I feel that it expands on animals and Elphaba's social isolation, but is still lighter than the novel's depth. And obviously the novel would win because it's able to really explore all these different themes, especially, like I said, because there are three distinct parts. It's able to basically be three different books and talk about themes very in depth and in different phases. Is it entertaining the whole time? That's a different category. But it does deliver its theme the most. A little heavy-handed if you ask me, but it certainly does that. I also have to say, I just want to add that I'm not 100% buying how amazing this allegory is in Wicked, because if you think about it longer than 30 seconds, it falls apart immediately. I think the allegory is strongest with Elphaba's green skin, because allegories often use absurd and exaggerated or hyperbolic imagery to really hammer in a point that people may not be aware of or are blind to. So showing them such an obvious and contrasting view of like someone with green skin. However, if animals are supposed to represent persecuted people, so in this case it's an allusion to the Holocaust, is comparing a marginalized group to animals and then the rest of the world is human the way to go about it. It's a fine line, because at least a lot of people give Zootopia the same flack, but at least in Zootopia, they're all animals. So it's just animal on animal crime. Same way when, discrimination happens, it's just human on human crime. And that's the issue, because human rights is the issue versus animal rights and human rights. Yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one, isn't it? And romance arc. This is a romance-centered channel, so of course we're going to talk about this. That being said, I'm not going to lie. They're all tied for last. Like, what was this, honey? What was this? If I had to choose, I would say the novel wins out slightly above the other two. The novel has a more minimal, subtle, like, slow burn with Fiyero and Elphaba, and there's no love triangles or contrived arcs, so that makes it a little bit more natural when it comes to the romantic development. I still don't think it's as good as it could be, especially given how much time Fiyero and Elphaba spend together. They probably have the most like screen time on page than all the other versions, and yet I still didn't feel that compelling romance between them. So again, I really think it should have been done better. Then I would actually put the musical in second place. I feel like in the musical, it's fun, it's front and center, we have banter, and that's really fun. But like I said, it's still very much underdeveloped, especially given how much their love has to grow for the eventual sacrifices they're going to make for each other at the end of the play. The romance just doesn't catch up to what the ending is asking of it. And lastly, we have the film in third place. The film has to be in third place because it had hours and material and all the stuff from the musical and the novel to develop a romance, and it didn't. It was still awkward and rushed and frankly unconvincing. It had the most runtime to figure out Fiyero and Elphaba, but they did nothing. There was missed opportunities for meaningful intimacy, inside jokes, or like shared moments, just anything. Romantic storytelling feels like a lost art nowadays, and I'm worried deeply. Now, when it comes to overall enjoyment, to no surprise, the book comes in last place, okay? This book is complex and heavy and very disturbing at times. And the beginning of the book did very much bore me to tears. The part where Elphaba is at the convent and is through the woods. Ooh, man, I was fighting for my life. It did very much feel like homework the entire time, except during the Shiz University. I did like the part where she and Fiyero had their affair. I felt like that was more interesting, but everything else in between, oh, baby. I was reading the book on my commute to work on the train, and here's footage of me fighting for my life and dying of boredom. It was tough. I don't know. I know there's some real Wicked fans who really love this book, and power to you, but that ain't me. I am not one of them. Okay? Next comes the musical. Because she's hilarious, she's fun, she's iconic. I think the presence of the people on stage and a lot of the comedic timing is just amazing on the stage, and you can feel it. And the way that they play up certain aspects of their character is just great. But it can never fully capture the out of this worldness, the largeness, the larger than life energy of the movies, which are in first place. Girl, you know I was obsessed with part one. Not so obsessed with part two, but that doesn't take away the magic that I felt when watching Wicked as a whole. Like, I'm still taking it as the whole, the sum of its parts, okay? It was iconic. The music, the costumes, the life, everything. Hearing Cynthia and Ariana in my ears is gift enough, okay? I will never get that back. So for that, I have to be grateful for the emotions, for the hyperfixation that I got, and also just the way, the magic, the foot stomping, iconic. Hire me. I'm available for a musical. And if I were to tally all the scores together, it gives a complete tie between the film and the book, and then the musical is just slagging behind slightly. But It's really up to you what your favorite version of it is. I do find that all versions have their significant flaws. Like none of them is significantly above the other in terms of the criteria, in my opinion. It's just really about your taste. Anyways, if you've watched this entire video, thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are you going to explore every version of Wicked the way I have? I don't know. Also, just a heads up, I do have a Patreon where I do post at least once a month, sometimes multiple times, and I will be doing a full in-depth review podcast on the Patreon of what I thought about Wicked Part 2, really going into my specific issues with the film, what I wish they had done. Not that anybody asked, but the patrons asked, and I will give them exactly what they asked for. So if you want to catch me on there, definitely do. Otherwise, please go ahead and watch any other video on my channel. That definitely always helps me. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. And I know you're probably thinking, when is the next one? Because, you know, I'm notorious for not posting. But I have already filmed another video. I'm just editing it. So that'll be on the way soon, okay? And I hope you have the best day. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye!
Darling, you